Hi, Beulah. How are you doing today?
Felice, I am good. Good to see you.
Great.
And you are
Well,
kindness personified, so that's a
thank
good
you.
start.
Kindness is free. That's where I am. So, I wanted to interview you today. We're going to interview you on something that I know you are very, very professional at. This is Felice Tillin, and I'm here talking to Beulah Trey. And we're talking about a concept and a process that will be framing out for you called person role. And Beulah actually, in my understanding of it, really named this process and has had one of the best influences around how to actually share this with other people, whether they're coaches, coaching clients, and leaders. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about this and something that you're very professional and very expert at. So, Bu, I wanted to just start out by asking you, since um, I know you have a very good frame around how person role is part of emotional intelligence, and I would love you to tell me a little bit more about that. So,
Sure. But I just want to start because you said that I frame person role.
hmm
And I think it's important for your students to know that
hmm
nobody ever does anything on their own, that
hmm
we're all standing on each other's shoulders.
hmm
And so person role is actually something that comes out of the work of Yvonne Agazarian and the System Centered Theory Institute. And part of what they work on is how do you build functional systems? So how do you how do you deal with all the dynamics that happen when we put people together? And what
mm
can you do to make it so that people can be their best?
mm
And so
That's
this
beautiful.
idea of person role is really about how can people be their best,
hmm
knowing that we can also be our worst.
hmm hmm
So anyway, so you asked me
So,
about
yeah, so emotional intelligence, how does it connect? So, thank you for the history of a little bit of history about the
yeah.
founder of this theory. How does this connect from your perspective to emotional intelligence?
So as you know, emotional intelligence is about how do we use our emotions to know what's happening, and then how do we manage our emotions so that whatever is best can emerge. And when we think about emotional intelligence, we actually think about four different things. We think about how aware am I of what my emotions are and what's happening. So, if you're going to, emotions in this way is data, right? That's
Mhm.
what we're talking
Mm,
about. Emotions is
nice.
data. So, so the first question is self-awareness. How do I know what's happening inside me? What data do I have that tells me what's going on for me? Self-awareness. Then once I have the data, then I have to figure out, well, how do I manage it? What do I
Mm,
do so that I can still be effective in this context? So that's
yeah.
the self-management piece. And then we all live in contexts. We all live in environments, mainly social. So then the next question is, how do I be aware of the emotions that are happening in my social environment?
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth part of emotional intelligence is, how do I manage those emotions?
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Great.
emotional intelligence on one foot, right? Four
Thank
different
you.
concepts. So what person role does is person role starts at the beginning, and it says, let's put self-awareness and self-management together. And let's think about how you can know whether you are self-aware and self-managing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not self-aware and you're not self-managing, you're in person.
Right.
If you're
Mm-hmm.
self-aware and self-managing, you're in role. Now, it's not
Ah.
as simple as
Mm-hmm.
saying being in person is bad, being in role is good.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not saying that, because the fact about emotional intelligence is sometimes our emotions have to, are because they're data, they
Mm-hmm.
have to fire
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
that we
Mm-hmm.
have data to know what's happening. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really important to know that person role isn't person bad, role good. Person
Uh-huh.
is where we get our data.
Right.
Role is what we do with it.
I
that makes
really love, yeah, I really love where you're saying that the data, first of all, that emotions are data, and that self-awareness is kind of like part of the person, and then managing your emotions becomes you and role.
right.
I imagine if you're not self-aware, like what happens if you're not self-aware at all in that situation? Is
Well,
there something?
well, and here's the thing: when you're in your person, by definition, you're not self-aware because your
Okay.
emotions are
Hmm.
running you.
Okay, I
And
see.
I mean, that's one of the things for me when I first started working with
Hmm.
this concept.
Hmm.
There were aspects of when I was in person that I actually thought I was at my best,
Mm.
you
Uh-huh.
know? So the thing about being in person is that we are often the last ones to know that we're in person. I had a
Yeah.
client recently who was talking about we had talked about he would get angry at his staff,
Hmm. Hmm.
and um, and he didn't know it. And his
Hmm.
staff started to have a name for what he was like when he did that. So I
What'd
brought
they
it to
call
him.
them?
We're
I'm
not going to
curious
say
now.
that name.
All right. Okay.
But uh, yeah.
Yeah.
But what was interesting is that when he told me about working on it, one of the things he told me is that the way that he started to recognize that he was in person was not that he knew what was going on inside of him, but he could tell that his staff was getting shift. They started moving around.
Oh,
He could
wow.
almost see them going, uh-oh. And
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
gave him like the
That
moment
was
to
a
go, wait a
signal.
minute, right. So
Hmm.
the thing
Hmm.
about being in person is we are not self-aware.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
what we need to learn is what are the different ways that we get into person. Because
Hmm.
what we've got to do, it's much like meditation, where you
Hmm.
have to teach yourself to wake up and recognize, oh, wait a minute, I've said the same thing 3 times with a harsh tone. I must
Hmm.
be in person. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying?
Hmm. Yep. You know what is really interesting to me about what you're saying is that I was really I'm intrigued by the fact that when you're in a leadership role, when somebody's in a leadership role, people know it right away before you do, and to be able to figure out for yourself what that signal is, I think that's a really hard thing to do. I wonder, did you help him figure out that signal, or did he kind of figure it out himself? As a coach, did
Yeah,
you figure, because I'm assuming you're his coach.
yeah, you assume correct.
Yeah.
Well, actually, at Vector Group, the
Hmm.
firm that I'm the CEO
Hmm.
of, we call person role a skill sept.
Hmm.
And what that means is that
Hmm.
we take different concepts that exist
Hmm.
and we
Hmm.
make them into skills.
Hmm.
So when we present the skill of person role, and your students will get this when we
Hmm.
do it, there's a
Hmm.
video clip that we present.
Hmm.
And we actually present it twice. The
Hmm.
first time you're
Yes.
all involved with the person. The
Hmm.
second time you begin to see all the reactions people had
Hmm.
around
Hmm.
them.
Hmm. Hmm.
So when we're teaching person role, that's one of the things we talk about
Hmm.
is, think about the last time you were out of role, you were in person. Think about the people that were around you. What were the signals?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
people can remember.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the nice things about using Zoom or using, video, if you're recording yourself in your meetings, you start watching them as a leader, you could start picking that up as well,
Right,
interesting. You get
right,
like your own video
right, right.
example. Yeah. So that's really, really amazing. And I think I've always enjoyed this concept and this process for myself because it's like another step over when you talk about coaching and presence and self-management.
Right.
Often the easy thing to say is breathe or do meditation techniques or do different mindfulness techniques, which are all wonderful. But I love having something a little bit more concrete. And the thing I love about this is the concreteness of it. That there's something
Yeah.
that I could do. I could say to myself, like something about how to get into role. So that's my next question to you is like, and it's about the context role person triangle and how do you go from person to role. So maybe you could just have at that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. And Felice, I have to say that when I started developing like how we were going to present
Mm-hmm.
person role, you were
Mm-hmm.
one of the first people that I did that with.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. We did it
part
together.
of, yeah, part of what was exciting there was that you got it immediately.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that
Mm-hmm.
gave me the confidence to know this is
Mm-hmm.
useful. So
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Yep.
Um,
You're welcome.
so think about what we're saying. What we're saying is that person is when you're just being.
Mm-hmm.
Role is when you're kind of going in a direction, you have a goal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's person role. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
the definition is when I'm in my person, I don't have a goal. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
being, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just experiencing. When I'm in role, I have a goal. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, if you think about it, what we're saying is that when you're in person, you're off the map.
Mm-hmm.
There is no map. There is
Mm-hmm.
just you.
Mm-hmm.
There is a self-absorption to person.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to move out of self-absorption to locating yourself in the map,
Mm-hmm.
right? What we say is that you need to understand your goal, your role,
Mm-hmm.
your goal, and your context. Those are your three words:
Mm-hmm.
role, goal, context.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine you're in your person. You're having a big feeling about something.
Mm-hmm.
Something that you thought was going to happen isn't happening. Your coachee that you thought you were doing really well with tells you they no longer want to continue in coaching, and you're stunned. You know,
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of things. So in that moment, it's very easy to lose track of what's going on. And so what we like, and you talked about the triangle is role, goal, context. So if you want to find yourself anywhere, if you can remember role, goal, context, you can find yourself. So first question is, what's your role? So in
Mm-hmm.
that example of your client giving you some some really surprising news, right?
Yep.
Wait, I thought we were doing great.
Yep.
So the first question is, what's your role?
I'm still a
Okay.
coach, right?
Right. I'm a coach, right? And my role is to coach this person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so in that situation, there's other rules that cannot come up for you, right? You could be a small business owner
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
who relies on this coachee for their business. So
Mm-hmm.
just the thought, what's my role? And
Mm-hmm.
then deciding which one you're going to be in that
Ah,
moment is
that's important.
already,
Yes.
right? It's a way that you're beginning to bring yourself out of the data of your emotions
Mm-hmm.
and into clarity about something. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
role. The role I'm going to be in right now is coach. I could have this goal of small business owner, but I'm putting it to the
Mm-hmm.
side. I
Mm-hmm.
am a coach, and my role is to be a coach to this person that
Mm-hmm.
right now wants to leave coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Then role, goal. Okay. The goal, because every role has a goal.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're doing is, in some ways, and I think by
Mm-hmm.
this time we've talked a little
Mm-hmm.
bit about the
Mm-hmm.
amygdala, but you're
Mm-hmm.
hooking your frontal cortex, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
hooking your thinking power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So your goal in this situation would be to provide your client with the best session you can provide them with
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so that they can understand, is this really the right move for them?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Right? If they're thinking it's time for them to end coaching,
Mm-hmm.
then a really good session that explores
Mm-hmm.
how has coaching been, what's been helpful, what hasn't, is going to serve your client really well
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
they have a decision to make.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
you will understand more about how it is that you didn't get that your client was this ambivalent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the goal.
Mm-hmm.
The final piece of a role and a goal is that every role and goal lives in a context.
Mm-hmm.
And so context, oh, you know what? I wanted to say something else about the goal.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two pieces to a goal. There is the explicit goal, which is what I'm doing, right? So what I just described. But there's also always an implicit goal. And the implicit goal always has to do with our personal needs and experiences. So in this situation, in terms of the goal, we're going to be balancing the goal we have for the session with perhaps our worry that we're not going to have enough clients. And we're going to have to keep moving ourselves towards the explicit goal. But the only way
go ahead. This is something that I wanted to just bring up at one point. I was going to wait till you get to context, but I think this is such an important lesson for coaching, because so often in coaching, well, not so often, but it's very common that we tend to go towards I've got to sell somebody on my coaching. I've got to build my business. How do I get this person to be interested in coaching? And the paradox is the way you sell coaching is by coaching. Like, you don't really sell coaching by selling coaching. You sell coaching by actually coaching. And that's the choice you made in the role there. You made the choice of being in the role of the coach and not in the role of the small business owner at that moment. But in some ways, it serves both roles.
Right. Yeah, I was saying, which is that I never sell, because whenever I find myself selling, it never works.
Right.
But I usually make the sale.
Yes. And you do.
Yes.
I will attest to that view.
Well, because I love talking to people. And I love the experience of it. And as you said, when people get an experience of what coaching is and it serves them, they want more.
Yep, exactly.
So, I mean, to your students, I think what you're saying, Felice, is really become a really good coach and clients will come.
You won't have to worry, right? Build it and they will come, right? It's a field of dreams.
It's really true with coaching.
It really is. Yeah.
So anyway, so that's role.
So tell us a little bit about context. Yes.
Goal, context. So context is kind of like the background against which the role and the goal operate. So in any context, we always talk about there being driving and restraining forces towards the goal. So what happens is, if we're thinking now about person role, right? So you're in your person, you got clear on your role, you clarified your goal, and now we want to look at the context within which this is all happening. So there are lots of things that you want to take into account in terms of context. One is what's happened in your client's life, right? You got to find out, did something happen so that now coaching is different than it was last week, right? So context involves everything in the environment that impacts the role and the goal.
Wow.
So COVID would be a big context now,
It's
right?
a context. And sometimes I've found myself, when I'm trying to go from person to role, sometimes it helps me to look at what context I'm in, and then it helps me figure out the goal. Like sometimes I need to say, well, I'm in this context, I'm on, it's COVID. I understand that there's probably some issues with my client here. And I need to be a coach to them, as opposed to a small business owner right now, because, it could go both ways, but the context helps me focus.
Yeah. And I think what you're also bringing out is the idea that it is a triangle.
It's a triangle.
You can start anywhere and you always have to go everywhere.
Right.
So it's like, if you find out that your coachee just lost their job, right, that may change the goal.
Yep, exactly.
So
that's exactly right.
It's a very dynamic kind of process with role, goal, context.
Yeah. It's a beautiful frame. It's a
And
beautiful
it is,
frame.
yeah.
So I want to ask you a couple of other things before we conclude here, both about how we use purchase and goal. And I know you talked about it a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit more about how you use person goal as a coach for yourself. And then how also do leaders use it? Like, how do the clients, or how do you use it as a leader? How do your clients use it as a leader? Like, what are some of the applications for this process?
Yeah, nice. Well, the thing about person role is that people get it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people get it, and they also get what they're like when they're in person. Like, it's
Let me
almost like
say that they get it when you teach it. They do get it when you teach it.
you know, because it's kind of like, oh my God, yes, I was in my person then. And what I like to say is, whenever you're not happy at work, whenever things aren't going well, and you're just like, ugh, you're
Yeah.
probably in your person.
Right.
Because when you're in role, data is just data. It doesn't have that bite to it. And so that's a lot of what we teach our clients at Vector Group. Person role is our foundational skill. Every single client that we coach, they begin with person role, because we feel like, how can a leader do what they need to do if they don't know when they are moving towards their goals?
Right.
And so, for example, when we get clients where the issue is that people complain that they're angry and that they yell and that they're abusive. Well, that's all about somebody being in person.
That's right.
So when people learn that, they don't have to get into, oh, I'm abusive, I'm bad, and then, you know, pity potty, which doesn't serve anything.
No.
But when they frame it as, oh, I get into person, and what's the trigger that gets me into person? And then, you know, oh, okay, this trigger is coming. How do I frame this so that I can stay in role?
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of how we use it with our coachees, is just as a way of recognizing. There's a story that comes to mind, which is, I had a client once who was, because usually when we think of person role, we think of people who are loud and expressive.
Right.
But this is an example where I had a client, and she was a very shy woman. And when there was too much stimulation in the room, she was a CEO, so when there was too much stimulation in a room, she would do some self-soothing behaviors. So she would start putting on lipstick, she would scratch her head, she would move her feet, and she was totally involved in self-soothing herself.
Wow.
Right? So she was in person. And her team started developing this magical thinking about what was going on. So it was like, okay, so if she starts putting on lipstick, that means she's really sick of you. Like, whatever you're saying, she's not going to go with.
Oh my gosh.
Right. They started
Wow.
reading into her self-soothing behavior.
Yeah.
Right.
With lack of data, we will fill it in, right? Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing about being a leader, is that when you go into person, everybody knows it, and they get scared. And so they start making things up about you. So in this situation, when she heard what was happening, she realized that her self-soothing behaviors were actually not helping. And that when she started to feel anxious, she needed to come forward and do more containing behaviors for her team. That was what being in role was. And the concept really helped her, because it was like, she didn't have, the nice thing about person role is, you don't have to go into psychoanalyzing. You don't have to go into why am I like this? You know, it's none of that. It's like, this is you unconscious. This is you just being involved with yourself. There's always a trigger, right? Find the trigger, and then
Mm-hmm.
get into role and figure out
Mm-hmm.
how to manage it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
saying it sounds really much simpler than it is. It's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lifelong process.
Yeah.
Um,
I bet you coached that woman quite a bit, that CEO, to get to that place. Aside from collecting data from all the people around her, right? There's a lot of work involved in that. But it's nice to
it,
kind of boil it down to the simplicity.
yeah, yeah. It's a story I love to tell
It's a great story.
because at her retirement party,
Mm-hmm.
there was lipstick at every place.
Oh, how
And they all, at
nice.
some point, when she got up to speak, they all put on their lipstick. It was very sweet.
Sweet. Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to ask you one other question that maybe is a little bit more about, I was thinking of just trying out, like looking at how people can personally use this,
Mm.
knowing that we've got a group of coaches who are listening here. And sometimes the best way to start with something like this is to use it yourself. And I wondered if you had some examples of either yourself or somebody that you know, maybe outside of a work situation, maybe with family or friends, where they were able to move from use person and role to kind of improve the situation or the relationship or whatever. So I was wondering if you had a story
Well,
about
they say that the teacher teaches what they need to learn, right?
that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So I'll cop to it. This is,
Okay.
I think, learning about how to catch myself in person and move into role
Mm-hmm.
is it's like an ever deepening process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, um, so many examples. Um,
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking about a bunch myself right now. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm always in person at home.
oh yeah, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
This is personal. So last night I came I came home and it was late, and my husband told me that the dog had peed on the bed and
Oh,
that the sheets, I know, the
it's the
sheets.
worst.
Okay, so you don't blame me, right? Like
No,
how
no.
how could
So
anybody,
I'm already in person here.
right? Okay.
I'm feeling it
Right. And the sheets were still, in
on the
the
bed.
laundry room, in the
Oh, okay.
laundry room, right?
All right.
And I just lost it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was kind of like, oh my God, like wash the sheets.
Right. Right.
And my husband, God bless him, just said, can you be kind?
Aw. Aw,
And it just,
kindness. Yeah.
yeah, kindness. And it
Kindness. Yeah.
just like, it's like, what happened to me is I could not move into, into role quickly,
Mm-hmm.
but I could tell that the best thing I could do was not keep going
Uh-huh.
and take care of it.
Wow.
So I
Mm-hmm.
went upstairs and I put everything in the wash, and I gave myself that time to calm down, to
Mm-hmm.
cool down.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back downstairs, and I was like, okay, do over.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh,
So yeah, so that was just last
yeah.
night. So
Yeah. Well, I think given where we are in our lives right now, where we're spending so much time at home, at least
yeah.
at this time, I don't know when people watch this video, maybe that won't be the case, but when you're spending so much time at home, I think it's good to use. Yeah, that would be nice. It's nice to be able to use this same kind of piece or practice it, when maybe you're not even coaching, but you're in other situations and you could kind of practice this.
Yeah, and in
So,
fact, that is a lot what happens to our clients. And I think
mm-hmm,
for those of your coachees
mm-hmm,
who are looking at being executive coaches,
mm-hmm.
one of the things that surprises our clients sometimes is, oh my God, this really helped me at home.
Right, right, right.
And it's kind of
Yeah.
like, yes, because we're all humans, and we're at
Mm-hmm.
home, we're human, we're at work, we're human.
Right, right, right. And we could
Um,
be at our best or not at our best. We could be kind or not kind. We could make those choices. And I think the triangle of person, role, and context is really, really an important piece of that. And and unique, actually. It's not something that like you can read about everywhere or find out everywhere. This is like a unique presentation. So I thank you so much for joining us today. And I look forward to more.